Our chalice lighting today is by my great and wonderful colleague, Reverend Aaron Payson. May we light our chalice this day as we would light a candle in the darkness. The troubled world in all its forms cries for expressions of solidarity, justice, and peace. Let our little flame be a sign that we join the world as it raises a common voice to end violence in all its forms, especially this day, warfare. Let our time together this day give us courage, strength, and fortitude to demand more from those chosen to lead, that we would have them serve as we ourselves are committed to the preservation of life and the planet that sustains us all.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester's online Sunday morning worship service. We are glad that you have joined us virtually this morning. It is an act of love that we gather in this way once again during this time of pandemic response. We begin by acknowledging that in Worcester, Massachusetts, we work, learn, live, and worship on the seized ancestral homeland of the Nipmuc people, who survive and remain active as the Nipmuc Nation. We hope that this service gives you an opportunity to pause for a few minutes to gather in community so that we might care for each other, take a moment to reflect on our own well-being, discover opportunities for spiritual refreshment and service in the wider world, even as we are at a personal distance. We gather this way this morning in solidarity with those families in our community who have been exposed or diagnosed with COVID-19 in recent days. We had hoped to be back to worship in person and online by now. However, due to the need to replace the furnace that warms the sanctuary, we are still in this remote space. Our hope is to return to in-person online worship next Sunday, March 6th. Please stay tuned for more information and weekly communications. So that we might come to know you better as you are able, please list your name on your video feed. Please note that this service is being live streamed on Facebook and is being recorded for future availability on the church YouTube channel, as well as our website, Worship Archive. Following the service this morning, you are invited to join us for virtual fellowship hour. Once again, welcome and thank you for joining us this morning. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Sue Neaz, and I am the IHN Congregational Volunteer Coordinator for this church. And I'm here to share with you a big announcement. Next slide.
IHN has changed its name. The Interfaith Hospitality Network of Greater Worcester is now in the Hour of Need Family Shelter. Here's why. When IHN of Greater Worcester was created in 1997, we modeled after and affiliated with a national organization called Interfaith Hospitality Network, headquartered in New Jersey. Over the years, as our support from member congregations and Friendly House has grown, we found our interactions with the umbrella organization, Interfaith Hospitality Network, steadily decreasing. Additionally, IHN at the national level changed its name to Family Promise. Recently, Family Promise required that we re-affiliate and change our name to Family Promise as they own the rights to the IHN Interfaith Hospitality Network, or to disaffiliate altogether. We have had multiple meetings about the situation we find ourselves in, both internally and with representatives from Family Promise. We have concluded it is not in our best interest to move forward with Family Promise for the following reasons. We have weighed the benefits of affiliation and do not feel it is helpful to our organization. The yearly affiliation fee is $3,500. To affiliate with Family Promise, we must change our name as well to Family Promise of Greater Worcester. While our name may be changing, our mission and commitment to our families will not. We will continue to maintain our shelter model and provide the same, if not better, level of services to the families. Working in partnership with its member religious congregations, volunteer groups, and individuals, In the Hour of Need Family Shelter promotes self-sufficiency by providing temporary shelter, supplies, and housing advocacy services to families with children who are experiencing homelessness, regardless of income and family structure. By providing comprehensive assistance and loving support to families who are homeless, IHN can act as a catalyst for community change. Please speak with your congregational coordinator or visit our website at www.ihnworcester.org to find out how you can get involved with volunteering, donating, or purchasing tickets for IHN's biggest fundraiser, the virtual Evening of Hope, coming up on March 24th. On behalf of In the Hour of Need Family Shelter, we would like to express thanks for the generous and ongoing support of our program.
We would love for you to join us on Thursday, March 24th for our virtual Evening of Hope. Tickets are only $35, or you can sponsor us. And this will be a fun evening of entertainment, online auction, and goodie boxes delivered to your door. Thank you.
Our opening words this morning are those of Kay Montgomery. February is not for the faint-hearted, I think. It's exceedingly ordinary, having neither the romance of spring nor the bravado of winter. And the ordinary is tough, it seems to me, demanding as it does not only endurance, but imagination. We gather on this late winter morning in a village of faith, warmed by those who join us, saying to one another by our presence here that together we find comfort and even hope in the gray days of February, in the dailiness of our lives. We have noted the light of the late afternoons and the odd in and out of sequence, melting day. Join in meditation in praise of simple stamina and with faith in renewal. Our opening hymn this morning is number 1052 from Singing the Journey, We Are.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreams. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time. We are daughters of dust, sons of great visions, sisters of mercy, mothers of love, lovers of life, and builders of nations, we're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace, of faith, the makers of peace, the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of the ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. Each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one.
I'm going to invite Robin Mitzcavitch, the director of our religious exploration, to come forward this day and share with us our religious exploration moment. Good morning, Robin.
Good morning, Aaron, and good morning, everybody. I was interested in hearing some words in our opening reading this morning because it really went along with the story we discovered together this morning in our religious exploration Zoom. To have power is to have endurance, determination, and stamina. In honor of Black History Month, which we have been celebrating all of February, and upcoming Women's History Month happening in March, we read a story called Bessie, Queen of the Sky. And it was about the power, determination, persistence of a young girl named Bessie Coleman, who ended up, despite many challenges, learning and pushing her way to her passion and dream of becoming a pilot. And Bessie Coleman did become a pilot, the first African-American pilot in the world. So that was a great story to hear. And we had a discussion about things that we hold in our hearts as passions and how we can go forward with them into the world with determination, persistence, and courage. And it was a great morning. At 1 o'clock today, we will have author Wendy O'Leary on Zoom to talk about her new book and help caregivers of children in any realm talk about children's big feelings and how to acknowledge and work with them. And Wendy's new book is called Monster Parade. That's 1 o'clock on Zoom. You can go onto uucworcester.org to get the link to the Zoom. And then this evening, our youth group is working on their magnificent youth group service, which will happen on March 27th at our church, live this year. We hope to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robin. And thank you to the Religious Exploration Committee and all the volunteers who continue to make our program such a stellar experience.
Our reading today is The Affirmation of Hope by Loretta Williams. We, bearers of the dream, affirm that a new vision of hope is emerging. We pledge to work for that community in which justice will be actively present. We affirm that there is struggle yet ahead. We know that in the struggles is the hope for the future. We affirm that we are co-creators of the future, not passive pawns. And we stand united in affirmation of our hope and vision of a just and inclusive society. We affirm the unity of all persons. We affirm brotherhood and sisterhood that allows us to touch upon each other's humanity. We affirm a unity that opens our eyes, ears, and hearts to see the different but common forms of oppression, suffering, and pain. Yet we are one in the image of God, and we celebrate our hopes for human unity. Within ourselves and within the gathered community, we will discover the strength not to hide in indifference. Affirming that hope, publicly expressed, energizes and enables us to move forward. Together, we pledge action to transcend barriers, be they racial, political, economic, social, or religious. We pledge to make our tomorrows become our todays.
We come to that time in our service when we are given an opportunity to share that which is symbolic of our own efforts and dreams, that which symbolizes what we would like to create in the world. An offering that we take up each time that we come together in this space for worship in order that we might continue the ministry and missions of this congregation so that we, as a collective of like-hearted people, can continue to help create the world in ever more meaningful, just, and healing ways. So I invite you to participate in our morning offering this morning by either texting 508-231-5335 or visiting www.uucworcester.org/donate. This time our morning offering will be received.
Go.
We come to that time in our service when we're given pause to consider that which is deepest in our hearts, or most profoundly on our minds, or in the work of our hands, in the days that have transpired or in the prospect of days to come, joys and sorrows that touch us deeply and are given another measure of meaning because of our capacity to share them in the midst of a company that claims us as a co-journeyer. So I invite Frank to stop screen share, and for those who would like to share a joy or sorrow, to either raise your virtual hand or open your microphone so that I might call on you in turn. If you're joining us online this morning via Zoom or Facebook Live and would like to have me share your joy or sorrow, you're welcome to place it in the chat. Please do precede it by the words, please read, so that I can find it quickly. I would begin our time this morning with a sorrow that was sent to me this week by Christina Heffernan, who writes that she would like me to announce to the congregation the depth of her stepfather, John Wool. His adventuresome spirit and calm demeanor were a blessing to all of those who knew and loved him. He lived 90 amazing years, full of adventure. Are there other joys or sorrows to be shared this day? I see Janet Cutman has opened her mic.
I can share. As most of you know, I went through a diagnosis of metastatic breast cancer in my spine in December, had major back surgery. I'm recovering from that, so that's a good thing. I've gotten through my radiation treatment. That's a good thing. And now they're trying to determine which treatment plan for the cancer for the rest of my life. And I happen to fall into a category that is so tiny, it's less than 0.25% of women, and they don't know what to do with me. So I'm supposed to have a biopsy on Monday, but they may not be able to get at the second location. I'm not sure what that means. I see Dana-Farber for their thoughts. I don't know what they're going to come up with, because typical me, I'm doing my reading. I know what questions to ask, and I know that their answers are going to be a guess. So it scares me, because one path gets at what's going on with me, the other path doesn't. And it's very unclear which path I should be on. So I appreciate your prayers and good wishes. Thank you.
Janet, all prayers and good wishes to you today. I hear that this is a very scary time. Please know how much this congregation adores you, loves you, surrounds you, supports you, and is with you in this as we move forward together.
Thank you.
Paul Marr.
Good morning. I got a concern, sorrow, I don't know. I was listening to the news this morning, and with Ukraine and Russia put his the nuclear stuff on high alert, and I'm scared.
I hear you, Paul.
Yeah.
I think it is a moment of pause for all of us to recognize how anxious we are in the midst of all of this. We hope that in the coming days there are more peaceful means that are deployed. And at the same time, we also recognize how very fraught this is for all of us, especially the people in Ukraine at this moment. So my understanding, Paul, that it is your birthday on March 1st?
No, I was wishing Mike Bradley his birthday's March 1st, but mine's November 18th.
November 18th.
Write that on your calendar.
So we're going to wish Michael Bradley a happy birthday this morning. I know Michael is also dealing with a lot of physical ailment at this time from recent falls. So we send Michael all measure of energy and good healing today as well.
Oh, there he is.
So Laura Lanahan writes, moved closer to obtaining full guardianship of my grandson. Family and friends continue to help me as Rain refuses to talk to anyone at this moment. Please continue to send good thoughts for this as a life changer for all of us. Thank you. Are there any other, let's see. I don't see anything else on Facebook. Are there any other joys or sorrows? Michael, you have your microphone open.
I just want to thank the congregation for all the help they're doing, for bringing me groceries and all that. And especially Kristen and Sue and Cheryl. They're doing a lot for me. I still get dizzy at times when I get up, but I'm able to talk a lot better. I'm not stuttering as much. That's a good thing. And then otherwise, I have doctor's appointments this coming up week, so hopefully they say good things.
Good speed to you in recovery, Michael. Good speed to
Thank you.
The Bajun family has their hand raised.
Hi, this is Matt Bajun. I have a joy. My father was in the hospital for 11 days, and he is home. He's doing well, and it was really good to see him. Of course, with COVID protocols, I was not able to see him. They had just one guest per patient, and aligned with his time back from the hospital, my brother and sister-in-law came. So this past week, we spent some good time with the family. So very, very joyful for that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Matt, and congratulations to your father. I hope that his continuing recovery is swift and healing. Let us be in the spirit of prayer and meditation. Holy One, this morning, we bring into our hearts and minds those families for whom the last few days have meant grief at the loss of loved ones. And we are mindful this morning of all of those in our midst that continue to move toward health and wholeness. We recognize that this is an anxious time for many. As we appear to stand on the precipice of warfare again in the world, we call to mind that inner strength and stamina and courage to face the unknown in this moment, to bring whatever resources we have to bear on this bruised and hurting world. May we have the compassion to reach out to others in this moment and to embrace in common companionship as we face the future which has yet to unfold before us. May we use what power we have to communicate to those in power the essential nature of peace. Let us be mindful this day of the joy of health returning and for another trip around the sun. And in all of this, may we abide in spirit of gratitude and thanksgiving for the life that we share and the opportunities given us to serve each other's well-being. Amen, and blessed be. We can move to the next slide. And we can stop share this moment. I want to begin by letting you know that Matt has communicated to me that he is to be operated on March 1st. We continue to be in communication in order to support Matt and his family during this challenging time, and certainly we'll be offering updates on his health and well-being as they're made known over the course of the next few days. I want to begin with a confession. This is not the sermon that I had planned. Which shouldn't surprise me since the title of the sermon was developed months ago, and one of the first adages in ministry that my father shared with me is, the farther away the sermon, the more obscure the title, in order to make room for the changes that inevitably come and the circumstances that arise between the moment when the thought of something to share changes because of the state of the world. My colleague Kelly Murphy Mason talks about the old joke about the minister who drove the church staff to distraction by his routine neglecting of deadlines. So when he failed to meet them, other people would get creative on his behalf. If the weekly newsletter went out before he had settled on the sermon topic, the staff simply listed "The Great Mystery" as the title. We have no idea what the subject of the minister's preaching this week, the staff quipped. It's a complete mystery, but we're certain it will be great. Well, I'm not so certain about greatness, but this is not the sermon that I had planned months ago. My thinking then was to address the way in which the rhetoric of empowerment, as it has evolved since its appearance in public discourse in the 1960s and 70s, has dramatically shifted away from the radical vision that it first communicated. A vision that is in desperate need of revisioning and refocusing efforts on local, national, and the global scene. However, the events of the last week in Ukraine have rightly been a cause for global alarm. And I, like so many of you, have sat in stunned disbelief that on the heels of a worldwide pandemic, we now face the possibility of worldwide conflict. And like you, I've asked myself, what is it that we are to do in this moment, given all that we face? My reflection is then an attempt to do both of these things, to address the concept of empowerment within the experience that we now face as a country and a world. My thoughts this morning, like so many others, are in formation. What I have to offer is not conclusive. I speak to you in this moment not knowing all that might be known, and clearly not as an expert on global affairs. However, I do believe with all my heart that this moment in human history is decisive and requires that we all pause to consider the ways in which we participate in the creation of community, country, and the world that serves the health and well-being of all of its peoples. To do this, we might then take a moment to consider how and why it is that we ought to empower each other in this common quest, and the ways in which our understanding of empowerment can fall short of the very vision that the concept was created to facilitate. My thoughts this morning have been largely informed by the work of Anne Emmanuel Calvé in a 2009 article from the review Tiers Monde entitled Empowerment, the History of a Key Concept in Contemporary Development Discourse. Empowerment, notes the author, refers to principles such as the ability of individuals and groups to act in order to ensure their own well-being and their right to participate in decision-making that concerns them, that have guided research on the social intervention among poor and marginalized populations for several decades, at least in the United States. It's a term that gained a great deal of traction and was ultimately adopted within social service programs and social change movements with the publication of Barbara Solomon's 1976 book, Black Empowerment, Social Work in Oppressed Communities. It's a word that begins then to be increasingly used in research and intervention concerning marginalized groups, the African American, women, LGBT, or people with disabilities, for example. It's a word that described then theories that were anchored in philosophies that gave priority to the points of view held by oppressed peoples, enabling them not only to express themselves, but also to gain power and overcome the domination to which they were subject. Much of the theorizing that evolved in the 1970s was based on the work of Pablo Freire, whose 1968 book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, stressed that in every society, a small number of people exert domination over the masses, resulting in dominated consciousness. Freire, whose work in rural Brazil informed much of his thinking, posits the need to attain critical consciousness. He advocates an active teaching method that would help the individual become aware of their own situation, of themselves as a subject, so that they may obtain the instruments that would allow them to make choices and become politically conscious. For Freire, the role of the educator is not simply to transmit knowledge to the student, but to seek alongside him or her the means to transform the world that surrounds them. I thought about this week as I read the most recent op-ed by Ray Mariano in the Worcester Telegram and Gazette. I should note that I often take issue with Ray's perspectives. However, I was moved by his reflection this week. In it, he notes that over the years, the vast majority of men and women who wear a blue uniform have served honorably, even heroically. That's what I think, he says. But he continues, but what does the mother of George Floyd think? Having watched the video of her son being crushed under the knee of a police officer while he struggled to breathe until he had no breath left. What does she think of police officers? I'm guessing her opinion is very different from mine, maybe yours. He continues, that was what the student at Shrewsbury High School tried to imagine when he or she wrote a poem. That kind of thought exercise is not uncommon in high school classes. Some teachers ask their students to write essays imagining how Native Americans might have felt, or they asked them to write essays as if they were a soldier from the North or the South in the Civil War. And more than a few teachers have asked students to try to imagine how they would feel if they were a slave. History, he notes, is not one-dimensional. Teachers know that they need to do more than teach students names, dates, and places. A good teacher will want students to think about multiple perspectives. It's fair to say, he notes, that the words in the poem, which was a part of a student group's contribution to Black History Month activities, were very provocative and even one-sided. But that was the intent of the exercise, knows Mariana. He continues here, I think is one dimension of a pedagogy, or I continue here saying, here is what I think is one demonstration of a pedagogy of the oppressed as for our imagined it. The attempt through education to raise the consciousness of students in order to awaken the transformative power and potential of such consciousness in the lives of learners and ultimately in the lives of those they will companion in community as they grow and learn. To develop critical consciousness means to move from understanding to acting, to move from awakening to responding and becoming response-able to a world that so often marginalizes the experience of those who do not dominate power structures. At its best, such analysis should give us pause to consider what another's experience has been. Far too often, such exercises simply arouse the anxiety of the dominant, which more than not leads to anger and violence in order to maintain said power. What Cave and others note about empowerment is that in practice, especially as the concept gained influence in development circles, which saw economic independence and satisfaction of basic needs as sufficient means to reinforcing the power of the oppressed, in this case, especially women's power, what is really necessary pause here. I apologize, folks. My technology has just taken a blink. Let me back up a little bit. To develop critical consciousness means to move from understanding to acting, to move from awakening to responding and becoming response-able to a world that so often marginalizes the experience of those who do not dominate power structures. At its best, such analysis should give us pause to consider what another's experience has been. Far too often, such exercises simply arouse the anxiety of the dominant, which more often than not lead to anger and violence in order to maintain power, which is part of how I understand the development of the conflict in Ukraine. What Calvé and others note about empowerment is that in practice, especially as the concept gained influence in development circles, which saw economic independence and satisfaction of basic needs as the sufficient needs for reinforcing the power of the oppressed, and in this case, especially women's power. What is really necessary is the radical transformation of economic, political, legal, and social structures that perpetuate gender, class, and race dominations. This is especially true in most of the cases where the goals of development on the community, country, and global level are determined from top down. Indian researcher Srilatha Bethwali, in her book Women's Empowerment in South Asia, takes this approach when she outlines 3 fronts upon which action must be taken to transform power relationships. First, by questioning the ideologies that justify inequality, such as social systems determined by gender or class. Second, by changing the means of access and control of economic, natural, and intellectual resources. And third, by transforming the structures and institutions that reinforce and preserve existing power systems, such as family, the state, the market, education, and media. The vision is fundamentally different than simply providing access to more economic resources. It's a clarion cry for the transformation and fundamental ways in which economic decision-making, the development and access of other resources, and the institutions that control them are developed. As the recent mortgage crisis in this country demonstrated, just by giving someone access to the means to purchase a home does not fundamentally transform the institutions that control such resources. Indeed, in the case of the mortgage crisis, such systems served only to exploit and ultimately diminish the potential that such investment had for those who had been courted and ultimately harmed by such processes. The difference might have been more demonstrable if we had framed the crises as more of a humanitarian one than simply one of economic terms which threatened our banking structures. Such analysis plays out again when we look at the impact of the novel approach of microlending, which are initiatives that were based on the widespread assumption that access to financial resources suffices to empower women economically, and that it will automatically lead to social empowerment. However, study after study shows an entirely different reality. Loan repayment and saving dominate the self-help agendas, leaving little room for education efforts or for the conscientization of women. Despite greater access to credit, the control of funding remains in the hands of men, while workload and pressure to repay loans are increasing for women. That empowerment has come to mean access to financial resources misses the radical reshaping vision of empowerment as it was initially conceived. And that empowerment now becomes the primary lens through which those who have been marginalized, in our world are now invited to participate in market forces that are almost exclusively controlled by those who have maintained power at all cost. This suggests the term is rendered almost meaningless as it was initially envisioned. I'm reminded here of the words of my colleague Sophia Bentoncourt as quoted in the UUA Commission on Institutional Change report, Widening the Circle. She notes, "We are the theological inheritors of teachings on universal salvation. There is no winnowing out of the supposed unworthy that can be named sacred among us. It is our very universalism that is at stake when we turn away from the impact that our institutions have on the same communities and groups that society encourages us to dehumanize and make small." What I hear you say, does this have to do with what we are facing in the moment? The revolution which brought Ukrainian President Zelensky to power was a demonstration of the potential of democracy to turn the tide on the old oligarchical system of power and control. The vision of what is happening in Ukraine is the vision of what happens when a people make a determined effort to chart a new course for their future, and those who are in the position of power are left wanting. It ought to be a wake-up call to the rest of the world that the changes envisioned by the notion of empowerment are not going to be greatly welcomed by those who have benefited from systems of power and control largely operated with impunity as long as their power was not critically challenged. More important, perhaps, is the critique that economic power, while important, is not the fundamental means by which empowerment transforms. What is at stake, I think, not just in Ukraine, but in our country as well, is the movement toward a more equitable distribution of power at all levels of governance and institutional control. Like the old saying goes, give a person a fish and they'll eat for a day. Teach them to fish and they'll eat for a lifetime, but only if they have access to the pond and the means to perpetuate policies that affect the way the pond is managed. What can we do, I hear you ask? As shock about the current state of the world subsides and feelings of outrage and anger become more acute, I would have us pause and listen carefully to the voices that are not heard as loudly as those in power. It is clear that the isolation experienced by many during the pandemic has allowed fear-mongering to fester in many quarters. It's not a coincidence to me that the timing of the violence in Ukraine has come at this moment. What is required of us is that we mitigate against the malformation and malignancy that has festered out of our fear for one another. Our job now is to strengthen the ties that bind us as a human family and as a beloved community. In the coming days and weeks, we must find more opportunities to listen to each other and to challenge our own tendencies to react instead of reach out. As more ways are known to us to demonstrate the basic commitment we have to peace and global prosperity, we will engage them to the best of our abilities. Thus do we work to transform the world where it touches us, so that everyone realizes the power and potential of their contributions to our community and humanity. House the homeless, accompany refugees, get out the vote, and continue to challenge forms of racial oppression and white supremacy all go a long way toward this end here. And as more information is shared about ways that we can serve those in harm's way in the Ukraine and in our own community, or those displaced by violence, I am certain we will rise to those challenges as well. Amen. And blessed be. We can move toward the final liturgy and hymns. Our litany this morning are the words of my colleague Philip Lund. To the refugee families seeking a safe place for their children's dreams, say,
I am with you in this. To the trans teenager longing for a world that accepts them for who they are, say,
I am with you in this. To the Black parents wondering when will the lives of their children truly matter, say,
I am with you in this. To the lonely, the frightened, the dispossessed, say,
I am with you in this. To the bullied, the battered, the broken down, say,
I am with you in this. To the hungry and the homeless,
to the silenced and the ashamed, to the weary and the worried, say,
I am with you in this. To all those for whom your disheveled heart is aching, say,
I am with you in this. Our next slide. Our closing hymn this morning, number 1029 from Singing the Journey, Love Knocks and Waits for Us to Hear.
Oh
Benediction this day are the words of James Morrison. Within each of our hearts, there is a most glorious light. Go forth and let its spark help you understand what troubles both you and others. Go forth and let its light of reason be a guide in your decisions. Go forth and bring its ray of hope to those in need of help in both body and spirit, that they may find healing. Go forth and fan the flames of passion to help heal our world. Go forth and spread the warm glow of love, pushing back the darkness of the world. Go forth, my friends, and share your glorious light with the world.
Go.
Once again, beloved, worship in this place has come to an end, but our service continues. Next, with an opportunity for sharing with each other in our online fellowship hour. And I'll open the breakout rooms. I want to thank the Reverend Cheryl Leshay and Sue Neaz for their worship assistance this morning. and for those who have been responsible for our technology. Our online hospitality team, both Sue and Cheryl have done a tremendous job, as well as Bruce Leshay and Frank Sweetser this morning, who have managed our online content. The technical glitch that occurred in the middle of my sermon was my own computer, and I want to thank everyone for staying with it. I look forward to being with you, I hope, in person next week, where we won't have to suffer these particular challenges in the same way. And I hope that your week is wonderful. I know that it's going to be challenging. And I hope that you will reach out to me or any member of the staff if you have needs this week. And we will certainly keep you informed in the coming days about ways that we might reach out to each other and to the world as it continues to suffer the pandemic of violence. Blessings to you all.